This is a 2021 Gravity FSX Boost Eagle that needs 2 new bearings in the pivot bearings. Took a calipers, measured the outside diameter of this bearing, and then when I pulled out the shaft, I got the inside diameter of the bearing. It was inside diameter of 17 millimeters and outside diameter of 30 millimeters. Looked it up. It turns out it's a pretty standard bearing. It's a 6903 bearing. So I'm going to try to replace this without having to remove the swing arm or rear triangle assembly. Reason being, this here is the rear brake hose, and this is the dropper cable. And I just don't want to remove them. Not to mention this thing for the derailleur would have to be taken off, or at least loosened. So I want to try to minimize all the extra labor. So I'm going to go for it and see if I can just get this off, get these bearings out without using my bearing extractor, and see if I can just put in the new bearings where it sits in place. All right, I'm going to start out by loosening these nuts with an 8 millimeter hex. One on each side. Wish me luck here. So like I said earlier, I took a calipers and measured this shaft right here. It's 17 millimeters, which means the ID of this bearing, side diameter of this bearing, is in fact 17 millimeters. So it's coming out this side. There, I want to be able to pull it out of each side. Pull it out. Hopefully this will not cause me a problem by dropping down too much. I have a rope around the tire. All right, this one came out. That one came out. Now the question is, can I get to that bearing to pop it out without lifting up? And the answer is no. That bearing will not come out without some love. So I'm going to turn this on when I figure out what to do. Because quite honestly, right now, I do not have an answer. Okay, here's where I'm at. I removed the rear shock so I could get this whole thing lifted up. Behind each bearing, there's just this one ring here on each side. Pull that out of the other side. And I'm hoping I can take something like this, go through, and knock it out the other side. Let's get this out. That's inside the bearing there. Yeah, it's too large. And it's just too big for my extractor tool to get in there. Almost big enough. Almost high enough. But I'm at the point now I think I can get these bearings out. I just haven't quite figured it out yet. But that's where I'm at. Like I said, I thought I could go in with something like this. If this was a little smaller, I could. Just tap it out. We'll see. Okay, for the record, I started doing this, and the bearing is in fact coming out on the other side. I can only get it to hear that? Came out. Now when I press them back in, I can have them back in place and press them back in with my bearing press. Actually, this is the bad one. It's rough. It felt rougher though when I was feeling it before, but still it's mucked up. All right, I'm going to go do the other side. Hear that? Saw that. 2 bearings removed, forcibly removed with one of these. Take some alcohol and clean this puppy out. And 2 new bearings. Let's see if these are the right size. Oh, hell yes. 6903 is the bearing. Okay, I've got the rear shock back on the bike. I've got the swing arm pivot lined up more or less. Now I'm going to put in Silglide. I like silicone grease, at least for assembly. Put it on bearing surface both sides, so it'll slide in. There it goes. This little thing needs to go in before the bearing does. So, let me go get a scissors. There's no way I'm thinking I can use my bearing press. Thinking I can use my bearing press. I go all the way through and do both bearings at the same time. So, going to coat the outside of this bearing. It doesn't appear that there's an inside or an outside. So I'm going to coat the outside of the bearing with the Silglide silicone grease. And put that on like that. And that on like that. That lines it up. Oops. Holy cow. Now it's time to do the other side. Done something kind of stupid, but not too stupid. Put the brand new bearings down there laying next to the old ones. Fortunately, pretty easy to tell which one's screwed up. So see what I'm doing here? I'm actually using the rod to kind of get it started. I do have a press I'll be using in a second. Oh gosh, these things are just sliding in. Press not needed. Let's see what the other side looks like. So do I pull this out and use my press? It looks like it's all the way in. I'll tell you right now, those bearings were all the way in. I have expensive tools over there and not using them. So, I'm going to call this done. New bearings are in. Here's the bottom line. I was real lucky that these pivot bearings were not pressed in that tight, and I was able to get them in and out with primitive tools. I was also fortunate that this was actually, these bearings fit so loosely that I was actually able to use the shaft to bring them back into position. I checked the seating with them, as you saw with the hammer and the socket, but they were already seated. They're seated just fine. Looking good.